What's up everyone, Steven here from Techmaker Studio. This is building a decentralized Twitter clone with React.js and Aleph.im part 7. In the last episode, we started hooking up the WebSockets and we kind of made it to a point where we need to start filtering out duplicate posts, and we can see that back over in Chrome. We're getting a bunch of stuff over here that's it's actually not rendering correctly because we have duplicates, and React doesn't like it when you have duplicate keys and so on and so forth. So what we need to do first before we do anything else is not add the post if it's already in the list of posts. So JavaScript has a bunch of ways you could do this, but I want to use this method called sum, which is built in on array. And if we look at this basic example on Mozilla, you can see that you can define a function. For example, even. You have an array up here, and it says, basically tell us whether or not some of the stuff in the array is even. So what we want to do is define a function in our code that basically says, hey, if some of the items on the page have a matching ID, don't add it to the list. Hopefully that makes sense. And in our case, sum is basically one or any. So it would be cool if we had another method called any or something like that. I don't know if that exists, but this will work. So what I want to do, we need to look at one other thing, because if you look at this even function, it takes an element, and then you can see by default it takes an element, an index, and an array down here. And what this doesn't do is allow us to pass in some kind of variable. So you'll see what I mean in a second. So let's have a look at this. So let's make an array. Let's say we have an ID of 1, 2, or it doesn't matter what the array ID is, or the object ID is. But let's just kind of set up a couple here. So this is our array. Array equals this. Now suppose we want to do something like this. We want to say like array.sum, and then we have a method we haven't written yet called like includes ID. Well, we need to be able to say which ID it includes. And there's a handy way we can do that if we look down here. And again, this is sort of deep in the docs for some people. For other people, it's not. But some people don't actually read all the extra parameters and stuff you can pass in. But this is a super handy thing. You can pass in something called this arg down here. And basically, it says this is a value to use as the this keyword whenever we're executing the callback function. So anything that we pass in here will be used as quote-unquote this inside of the callback function, which we have not defined yet. So let's define the callback function, and we'll say function contains ID or something like that. It's going to take in an element. We really just need the element, the one default thing there. Then we're just going to say returns, or return rather, and we'll say element.id equals, and then we'll just say this and finish that off. So now this is actually pretty straightforward. So what we can do is say array.sum, and we'll say contains ID, and then we can add IDs to check. And if we close this off, you'll see here that it's highlighting this is going to be true. If we change this to be 4, it's false. ASDF is true. Cool, so that basically does what we want. So if we jump back over into the code, let's kind of start to put together what we want this to be. First of all, let's check over here really fast. Again, I keep forgetting what the exact data structure is here. Let's refresh this page. It's going to freak out because we have this encountered 2 children with the same key, which is the whole problem we were having before. Do we have any... Let me comment out this section really fast. And then let's console log our posts, I guess, inside of post.js. let's just console log props.post. And if we refresh, we should now have, we broke something. Maybe I'm trying to JSON parse something that doesn't need to be parsed here. Maybe that's what that is. There we go. Okay, so if we just open one of these up, each one of these item hashes should be unique as far as I understand it. I guess it's possible that if you posted the exact same content twice, you would have the same thing, but I don't think that's possible considering that there's a time on it. I think the whole object is probably signed to generate this hash. And I believe that probably encapsulates the timestamp. So you'd never have two duplicates if I'm understanding correctly. Let's just go with that assumption for the moment. So what we want to do is inside of here, and that's directly on this top level object. So what we want to do is say something like if not, and then we'll do what's the thing called, loaded posts dot sum, and then we'll say contains ID. We can use that same method, and then we'll do post dot item hash, something like that. And I'm gonna go ahead and add the curly braces here and bump that up in. And then up above, let's do const, and let's write the same method we wrote before, contains ID, and it's going to equal a function that doesn't take any arguments. No, just kidding. It's going to take the array, and then, or the element, sorry. I'll get it right eventually. The element, and then we'll say return element.item hash is equal to this, right? So we're checking if loaded post sum contains ID, post.item hash. And let's go over and refresh and see what happens with this. Do we get the same? It certainly looked like we got the same. We encountered two children with the same key. So that is indeed a problem. Let's see if we can figure out what happened here. So basically, we're just going to debug this now because that's where we are. So what we're going to do here is say console.log, and we'll say, let's say from socket, and then we'll do post.item hash. Okay, so there's that. And then up here, we'll say from console.log from callback, and we'll say, let's say element, and then we'll do element dot item hash, and then we'll do console.log from callback this, and then we'll just log out this. Okay, so let's come up here. This is going to log out a ton of stuff. It's going to be hard to sort probably, and I need to, we're going to want to basically not do all the logging we're doing over here, or else we're never going to be able to find anything. Okay, so if we go back up above all this stuff, we should see, okay, so we have from socket. We're not seeing our callback. I wonder what's going on with that. contains ID. Yeah, we're not seeing this here at all. That's pretty bizarre. Okay, so let's do this. So first of all, let's comment out this set loaded post so we can see beyond all the warning messages, because right now it's just like it's a mess. So if we refresh over here, now we should just have all of these from sockets. So we're obviously not calling into our method or our function, which is bizarre. So if you're like an expert JavaScript developer, you're probably noticing some like obvious things I'm doing wrong. I've been a Ruby developer for a long time primarily that's done JavaScript, but I'm just kind of now really getting more deep into it. So what I'm doing here is I'm checking if I'm kind of just backing this out to see if I actually call it here. I kind of want to just untangle this a little bit, simplify it, and see what's going on. So if we go back over to the browser and we refresh here, let's just see what we're getting. So we're still just getting this from socket thing, which is very, very weird to me. Didn't misspell anything obvious? No. Let's console log contains ID. And let's see if that gives us like a function or something. Whoa, wait a minute. So now I'm getting from callback element and then from callback this. Let me refresh this really fast and see if I get the same thing. Okay, so now I am getting my function logged out. You can see this is the actual function code, and then we're getting from socket, but we're still not getting our actual function being executed here. This is really bizarre. So I spent a bunch of time trying some clever stuff just now off screen, and I think in doing so I may have realized kind of just a simple reality of what's going on. So we obviously have access to our function here. But what happens with this is we call loadedPost.sum, and basically it runs this function for each element inside this array. Now, that kind of makes sense, except for I think what's happening is the loaded posts are empty the first time this runs. So if we look at what's happening here, we're awaiting get posts, and then we're setting loaded posts. But as soon as this finishes here, this code all just runs below. So we don't necessarily await this being finished before. And again, as I pointed out, I am not a super expert on JavaScript as of yet. I'm working on it. But I think that probably as soon as this finishes, all the rest of this code just runs. And this hasn't maybe even been set yet. So we have an empty array here in which we're calling set loaded post on. So to test this theory, let's just insert a thing here. Let's just say item hash is ASDF. And let's go over here and let's refresh the page. You can see that I kind of messed everything up with my testing. A cross origin error. Doesn't have access to, okay, so, oh boy. So that's going to be tough to do unless I just get, so let's save that again. Let's refresh here. Let's not render anything for now. Let's go ahead and comment all this out. That's going to help us. So I think basically what was happening was it was throwing a bunch of errors because I have missing attributes and stuff in there. So let's say item hash ASDF, and let's refresh, and let's see here. Yeah, so you see that. So now when we refresh, we're actually getting some comparisons that are being run. So now you see from callback ASDF, and then this is undefined. So it's kind of interesting, to say the least. I'm learning on the fly here. So I think what we should do, in order to make sure that we don't run the socket stuff until we have actually loaded the post, what we want to do is use effect. And basically what we're going to do, if we look down here at use effect load posts, we run this once on load. Basically, this is what this empty array means. So we're saying like, here's what I mean. It's easier to show the opposite example. So we say use effect, and we define an anonymous function, and then this array takes a list. It takes a list of properties that we want to listen to. So anytime, let's say we look at loaded post. I mean, that's what we're going to do actually. So what this is saying is anytime the loaded post changes, run this. Okay. Now we're going to get ourselves into trouble here pretty quickly. And you'll see why in a second. But basically, what I want to do is say, let's cut this, and let's just paste this inside of this use effect here. Now, this is a really good way to get in trouble, because what happens is anytime we get something back from this socket, we're updating loaded posts, which is then going to trigger this use effect again, which is going to essentially cause us to add exponential amounts of socket connections. So the first time it comes through, initially, so what we want to do first of all, just to kind of get this out of the way, if loaded posts dot length is greater than 0, then we want to connect here. That's kind of the core idea. So we don't want to even run this until we have some loaded posts. But this isn't enough, because what's going to happen is, okay, so we load the page, we load the post, so now we have multiple loaded posts. We're listening to the loaded post here. We're saying if you have loaded posts greater than 0, set up the socket, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now what's going to happen is somebody posts to the network, okay, and we're sitting here and we get that message. And so we call this callback, and now we add another. So now loaded post has changed. So now we add another socket connection. Now we have 2 sockets listening. And then somebody else posts, and each one of those sockets receives the same message, and now they update and do what they're supposed to do. Now we have 4, and then you repeat this, and you get 8 and 16, and so on and so forth. I think. Yeah, that's basically how that probably will work. I had this problem in another app recently because I put the UI together really quickly and did not notice. So what we want to do is say, let's add another state variable up here, and we'll say socket connected, and then say set socket connected, and then we'll say use state false. Okay, and then what we're going to do is say and not socket connected, and then at the very bottom down here we're going to add a set state. Nope, not what I wanted to do. Socket connected. No, set socket connected is true. Okay, so let's go refresh and see what's happening now. Okay, so now we're getting a bunch of from callback element stuff in here, which is what we want to see. We're not getting anything from socket now. So now we have an opposite problem, so that's weird. Just kind of scrolling up, I think what may be happening with this, you can see actually, it may be just like a visual thing. I scrolled really fast and went past it. Let's see if I can find another one. There we go. So you have this from socket, and then we have like the from callback element under it. So basically what's happening is we get an item coming in from the socket, and we already have 200 things on the screen, so we have to loop through each one. So we're console logging for each one of those. So we don't have a problem. I thought we had a problem, but we don't. So we're going to just kind of keep going. So the next thing we need to figure out is why our, where were we? Here we go. Let's refresh this. So it looks like this that we're trying to pass in is undefined. So we should only be getting back like 10 elements. Let's actually try to. So we know we're getting this item hash on the socket. We know we're getting that. Are we logging out the function still? We probably are somewhere. Let's come up here and okay, so we know this is undefined for the moment. Let's try this. Let's try to set this to a variable. We'll say const already loaded equals that, and then let's console.log already loaded. So what we would hope is to see trues, like 10 trues here. But we have 10 false. So our this value is not being set for some reason. Let's actually come up here and try to console log this again and just see what's going on. So we're probably going to get a whole bunch of undefines. Yeah, so you can see here we have 200 undefines and then false. So that's it looping through all 200 items. It's saying, hey, we don't know what that is. And then it's saying, yeah, we haven't loaded it because it's false. I'm wondering, So I'm kind of like not sure what's going on here. I'm wondering if we have something with like variable scoping somehow. I'm going to copy this and try to do this inline because it's really actually simple now that I'm just looking at it. If we run this like elements and then we just kind of paste in our comparison here, then this kind of matches the documentation a little bit more closely. So you have the sum function, you take in an anonymous function, and then you have the this arg. Just kind of, sorry for the bouncing around too much, hit the wrong button. So let's save this and let's refresh over here and see what happens. So we get 10 falses. Okay, so after all this time, I just saw something sort of obvious. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the comment. Now that we've inlined this, so let's go ahead and get rid of this. I don't know why we started with this. This kind of violates one of my rules of development, which is always start with the simplest thing, which in this case would be just inlining it. What we can do here is say const hash equals item dot or post dot item hash. And then inside this callback, let's just do console.log hash. Because obviously inside of this callback here, we're going to have access to the hash. Now, so you can see here we get the hash 200 times. Okay, so then let's do this. Let's say hash instead of this. And let's get rid of that trying to set this. I have no idea why that's not working. In my mind, that should work perfectly. We did it in the console when we started this episode, so I don't have any idea what's going on. But now we should be console logging true a bunch of times. So if we refresh here, you get 10 trues. Okay, so that's super, super, super obnoxious. But it seems like it works. So what we're going to do here is say if not already loaded, set the loaded posts, blah, blah, blah. And let's quit console logging. So we have our hash is our post item hash. Already loaded is check if sum. I already have that hash, blah, blah, blah. This is very simple now. Let's come over here and reload. Hopefully we don't get all those freaking UI errors. Well, we need to uncomment our user interface stuff down here. Our DOM elements. This was kind of obnoxious. Sorry, this series has been slightly more tedious so far than I anticipated, but we'll get there. Okay, so now we're not getting any duplicate stuff. Let me connect my wallet. Okay, so now I'm connected. Let me try to post something. Testing this. It's going to ask me to sign. And hopefully we see something appear in the background. Maybe. Let me console. Let me open up my... well, so that's not working. So that sucks. Oh, there it goes. It just takes a while. So the user interface probably needs to have some kind of thing saying like, hey, we're posting. Okay. I thought it was going to be instantaneous, but it looks like it's working. Testing again from Techmaker. Let's post this. Sign our message here. Now it happens instantaneously, so that one was fast. So we need some kind of user interface element, but now we're posting in real time. If anybody else posted, it would show up here. So again, sorry for the sort of bouncing around trying to figure all this stuff out. This should have been a lot simpler. What I'm going to do in the next episode probably is start working on this user interface a little bit. We're going to need something that says, hey, you just posted, we're processing it or loading it or something, like posting to the network with like a loading animation. And then when we actually get the message back on the socket, we're going to update that and swap to the new element. Something along those lines. We also need to fix this so that we pull in, you know, real potential profile pictures and have an empty state if you don't have one set. We need to switch to our own data model instead of using this chat. We definitely have some design updates to make. But yeah, anyway, so we'll pick back up with this tomorrow and keep it going. Thanks for tuning in to these workshops. They're definitely meant to be a little bit bumpier than kind of like a tutorial. So if you're enjoying this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you in the next one.